So, hello out there. Today we're going to just be talking about secondary dominance and secondary dominance. And we're going to basically um, just have a rundown dominance, a rundown of what is a secondary dominant and how does it work? What are the technical aspects of a dominant that's secondary, rather than how do we use it in a progression? We're going to cover that in a different lesson. So we're talking secondary dominance. We're really talking about temporary tonics, or something we call tonicization. Tonicization. Okay. And the concept here is that we are choosing a temporary tonic that is not our actual tonic. And then we are kind of highlighting that tonic harmonically with a dominant. Okay. So, how do you feel like you're resolving? Well, you have to have a dominant that kind of pulls you to your resolution. And in this case, we're choosing different resolutions than our normal tonic. This is a temporary move harmonically and is not a modulation. Okay, so modulation we'll actually cover in a different lesson as well. Um, Modulation would be a whole segment that is confirmed with a cadence in the new key. This is just a temporary shift, really just two chords, maybe another predominant chord leading into this, but then it goes right back to the original key. And like we said, this is all just temporary. So let's take a look. So what you'll notice in my notation here on the bottom is that we have these 5 of symbols. Okay, it kind of looks like a fraction. It's not actually a fraction. This is just how we're notating that we're taking a dominant of a new key. And so notice that the bottom number of our fraction, right, that really isn't a fraction, is the new key, right? So a 5 of 5 always resolves to 5. A 5 of 4 always resolves to 4. A 5 of 2 always resolves to 2. Now, you can have a deceptive cadence, for example, in this type of setup, but it's quite rare. And especially for our purposes for preparing for the AP Music Theory exam, you're not going to see any kind of weird, deceptive motion or anything like that. It'll probably be very textbook, and whatever your dominant of is going to go to that resolution. Okay, so the most common secondary dominant we have is a 5 of 5. We're in the key of F major. So what I tell students is always start with the second chord. Start with your resolution chord and see where you're actually going before you write your secondary dominant chord. So our 5 in our normal key of F major is C. So I'm just going to kind of mark that off here. Okay, that's my C major triad. If we're going to the key of C, what is the 5 of C? Because it's really what this notation means here. We're going to the 5 of whatever our resolution key is. And in this case, it's G, right? So we're going to have a G chord going to a C chord. Yes, we're in F major. That means that we're actually going to need some accidentals, right? Secondary dominant chords are borrowed chords. They are chromatic chords. So almost all of them are going to require some type of accidental to make them actually be functional dominants. Okay, so G major, and this is all in root position, right? No Arabic numerals here. So in G major, I'm going to have maybe both of my G's here. Okay, just to save a little space because I didn't write enough room down on the bottom. And let's do D here and B here. And to make this a functional dominant, I need the B natural. Just like any other dominant, you are going to have to resolve all your tendency tones. So in this case, we have our temporary leading tone, which is B natural, and that has to go up to C. We have a root position chord in our resolution spot, so we know the bass has to be C. We're going to try to keep some common tones if possible, and then move everything else by step and make a complete chord. If we'd had a root position 5-7 of 5, going to a root position 5, we would resolve it the same way that we would resolve a root position dominant going to a tonic in root position, right? Which means that we're going to have an incomplete chord. So for example, let's just say, I'll do this in a different color. Let's just say that we had in our G chord, we're going to put an F in there too, right? Let's see, where do we want to go with the F? Doesn't really matter. Why don't I make a little space? I do that and put the F here. Okay, everything else is the same. We would have to resolve this down, right? Just like any other tendency tone. And then we would have to resolve all of the other pitches so that we did not have any kind of parallel fifths, right? Even in contrary motion, parallel fifths and contrary motion count. So most likely, if we have a root position complete 5/7, we are going to have an incomplete root position 5, right? So something like that. We would have to triple the root. This is kind of a weird spacing, but at least you kind of get the concept of what it would be if we had a 5/7 in there. So, 5/7, like I said, same resolution pattern, 5-1, just in the secondary form, right? 5/7 of 5 going to 5 is the same. All right, so let's look at a couple of other inversion options here. We could have our secondary chord in inversion, okay? What I've done in the second example is given us a 5 of 4. Now, if you think about this, all right, our 4 is actually B flat, right? The 5 of that is F. And you might be thinking, well, how can you tell the difference between a 5 of 4 if it's just a triad going to 4 versus just, a regular old 1 to a 4 chord? It's tricky. And the issue really is that we need that seventh, right? The dominant seventh to kind of make it obvious, okay? Because we don't otherwise have any like new motion to go on there. So this 5/6/5 is going to end up being that. And remember, again, we have to make sure that we have the accidentals in the right place. So this is going to be an E flat in order to make this a major minor chord. So looking at our inversion here, right? We have to have the A on the bottom, right? So A, and then we don't have any restrictions really. How about if I just do F up there, and I guess maybe we'll do E flat here and C up above, right? It's kind of an open spacing. All right, but that's our 5/6/5 going to 4. And luckily in this case, the 4 is going to help us resolve our tendency tones, right? Because we have to think about if we're going to B flat, this is really an F7, right? That's going to B flat major, right? If we're going to B flat, our leading tone is A natural. So the A has to come up. That's going to be an easy way to keep our root position for our 4 chord. The chordal 7th has to come down, right? So we've got the B flat and the D. We're going to keep as many of these common tones as possible. And then the C can go wherever is, most convenient. And in this case, we probably would like to double the root just so that we kind of have that reinforcement of that tonality. So there's an example of a 5/6/5 of 4 resolving to 4. Last example is going to be a 5 of 2 going to a 2/6. So it is possible that, whatever our secondary chord is going to resolve to an inverted chord. Just like if we had a 5, we could have it go to a 1/6, right? It's a similar kind of motion. So let's again work backwards. So in F major, 2 is going to be G minor. So we've got G, B, and D. We know that the 2-6, we want the B flat in the bass. Okay. Now, a 5 of G minor is going to be D major, right? So we basically want to build, pencil's not working. Don't know why. All right. So this might look fun. We basically want to build a D major triad, right? And remember, this is a borrowed chord. In order to make it functional dominant, we're going to need a couple of accidentals here. Okay, so there we go. Now it's working. So let's go ahead and build this from the bottom. So we've got a D, we've got an A, we've got an F sharp, and let's just do D on the top again. Again, it's root position triad, so we can go ahead and double the bass or the root. They're the same. Okay, so going into the 2-6. Okay, we said we have the B flat on the bottom because we're in first inversion. We do have to resolve our tendency tone if possible, right? So we're going to go up with that, with the temporary leading tone going to our kind of temporary tonic. So that takes care of one of these triad members there. And then if we can keep a D, it would be fantastic. So let's go ahead and see if we can do that. And now in a 2-6, the first inversion chord, we can do creative doubling depending on what we have here. We can double the root if we want to. We prefer, if possible, to double the bass, or not the bass, the root, so that we can kind of reinforce, again, the function of that chord, especially with it being an inversion. And in this case, if we go down to G, we don't have any issues with that. That is fine to do. So, so we have doubled the root, but of course we're still in the first inversion. So our third is in the bass. So hopefully this gives you kind of a insight into just how secondary dominants work and how to build them and some of the resolution patterns that you might find.